Hello, and thank you for participating in the Regulatory Affairs 101 course entitled Regulatory Processes Leading to the NDA Submission. My name is Ramani Raghavan, and I'm a Senior Program Director in Regulatory Affairs CMC at Genentech. The purpose of this course is to provide you a fundamental knowledge and a background of the regulatory processes that support a new drug application, also called the NDA. The NDA is an application that is filed in the U.S. to obtain authorization from the FDA to market a drug in the United States. And so I'll take you through the different processes, different steps that go in to actually file an NDA process. And at the end of this course, you should have a fairly good understanding of the different phases of drug development, the goals and objectives at each one of those stages. And finally, the data requirements, common technical document format, and common technical document format for the NDA, and the different steps leading to approval of a new drug application. So, having said that, a lot of thought went into putting this material together for this course, and I certainly had a lot of fun putting it all together, and I hope you like it and benefit from this course as well. So, the following are the high-level objectives for this course. I'll start by giving you a brief introduction and an overview of the history of drug regulation in the United States, which I believe is quite important to understand in the context of the drug development process and and the regulatory processes in terms of the hows and whys for the NDA submission. We will then go on to review the drug development pathway and the different milestones along the process. We will then discuss the different phases of drug development and the goals and objectives at each one of those stages. Once we reach our stated goals and endpoints on the clinical program, what are the key areas and questions to consider before we submit the NDA? We will be talking about that. And then we will review the different types of meetings that we have with the FDA as we go through the drug development process and the scope for each one of these meetings. Once we have assessed the adequacy of data that we need for the NDA, we will need to submit the information to the FDA for review and ultimately get the drug approved in the United States. That's the goal. So drug development, as you know, is a really long process, on average spanning 12 years or more. Thus, the data collected can be quite extensive, and to present this efficiently and to enable the review to occur, there are requirements around the format for the presentation of information, etc., to support the NDA in what is called the Common Technical Document format, or the CTD format in short. So we will review the CTD structure and how the data is organized in the NDA dossier. We will then also take a look at some of the expedited development and approval pathways that are available for the NDA. And finally, after the submission, what happens? What can we expect? What is the typical process that the FDA follows during the review of the NDA? So the evolution of drug regulation in the United States. Drug regulation in the U.S. Predates the Food and Drug Administration that we currently know, and this has evolved over many decades. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906 prohibited the interstate commerce and misbranded and adulterated foods and drugs. So as per the requirements of this law, manufacturers only had to submit proof of strength and purity. There was really no requirement to submit this information to the agency before marketing the application. Before marketing. There was really no application at this stage. So before marketing, there was really no requirement to submit this information to the agency. And the agency at this point was called the Bureau of Chemistry. The company marketing the drug had a fair amount of leeway as the onus rested with the government to prove that the drug labeling was false and misleading before it could be withdrawn. The Shirley Amendment to the Food and Drugs Act was passed in 1912 that sort of raised the bar a bit by prohibiting the labeling of drugs with false therapeutic claims intended to defraud the purchaser. The amendment to the 1906 Pure Food and Drugs Act came about due to a rather unfortunate circumstance in which a medicinal syrup called Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup for teething and colicky babies was laced with morphine, but was unfortunately not captured on the label. So this resulted in many infant casualties. So as you can see that there's been a clear evolution in the drug regulation process in the United States because of some of these events that happened, and also to enable very efficient development of the drug, as we will see as we move later on into reviewing the history of the drug development. So the next milestone in this drug regulation in the U.S. came about with the passage of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, which set the stage for the current regulatory environment in the U.S. This law had several new provisions. It set the requirement to submit a marketing application to the FDA. It required that new drugs show safety prior to marketing, and it also set safe tolerance levels for unavoidable poisonous substances. The law also authorized the agency to conduct manufacturing site inspections. Several amendments to this act came about in the following years since its passage originally in 1938. The Durham-Humphrey Amendment in 1951 required that certain drugs be labeled for sale by prescription only. And then following that, the Kefauver-Harris Amendment that came about in 1962 due to what some of us know as the thalidomide tragedy, requiring evidence of effectiveness from well-controlled clinical trials to be shown prior to marketing a drug. So this law also made it mandatory to obtain informed consent from the patients that are enrolled in clinical studies, and formalized GMPs, or good manufacturing practices, for the manufacture of drugs, and also formalized the reporting of adverse events. The law also transferred the regulation of drug advertising from the FTC to the FDA. Following that, the Orphan Drug Act was passed in 1983 to promote research and marketing of drugs needed for treatment of rare diseases. So by definition, this is for a disease affecting less than 200,000 people in the U.S., and the applicant on its end received marketing exclusivity of 7 years upon receiving approval of the orphan drug.